So yesterday, what we have seen is we have seen this guy, table storage versus Cosmos DB table API. We have seen the differences. So database is nothing but like, SQL database, Maria database. So it's a storage thing. And containers, I think we have seen what are containers when it comes to Azure storage accounts. So we had to create so many containers, and within containers, we used to upload files. And items, this is something kind of new for us, I believe. So here, if you see, if you remember, again, in the yesterday's session, that we had to create the NoSQL account. I'm going to show you that. But before that, quickly try to understand this. So first, what you do is you create this database account. And within database account, you have to create database. And you can create one or more databases. So you can have one account and you can have n number of databases. And within a database, you should have a container. Okay. Container is like a table. So database, I think container, if you want to relate it with your SQL databases, right? Like structured databases, you can compare container as a table. Okay. And within this, you have items again. So items, it's like data you have within this table. You have different data, and you have again stored procedures. Like I said, right? For NoSQL, before we didn't have stored procedures, but thanks to cloud, we have stored procedures, we have user-defined functions, we have triggers, we have all these kind of things. Again, depending on the API, the names might be a little bit changing here and there. So here we call them containers, and for MongoDB API, I think we call them collections. For table API, we call them table. For Gremlin API, we call them graph. It's just the naming change, but at the end, if you see, the hierarchy still remains the same. But this is really important, right? When you're talking about a specific API, you need to use the same naming convention. I think that's the reason we have this table here, right? For SQL API, for the database, you call database, container, you call container, right? And the item, you can call document, or you can also call item as well. And when it comes to Cassandra API, the naming convention will change. I mean, the action and the usage is same, of course, but it's just the naming convention which gets changed here. And for MongoDB, it's database, collection, and document. This is a hierarchy, and this is how you call them. For Gremlin, you say database. Within database, you create graphs. And within graphs, like I was saying yesterday's session, you have nodes and edges and vertices. So you use these terminologies. And when it comes to table API, you don't really have database. You have tables, and within tables, you have items. Because table API, it's like a global thing, right? So it's like completely spread across the global structure. So that's the reason I think you don't have a database here. But just remember this. This is very important. And here we are talking about SQL API. Okay, so I think we understood what are they. Let's try to see them here. So go to home. If you want to create a new thing, just click on this, and then you try to create with this. Let me try to zoom in a bit. So you have subscription, you have resource group, right? So you have to select a resource group, for instance, and account name, right? So this is what I was talking about, database account. So here you have to give a unique account name within this resource group, right? It should be unique within this, and you can select the location. I think we have discussed the capacity mode, what is provisioned throughput and what is serverless. We know that. And once this is done, you just, go next, and click and review, and then you create your Cosmos DB. Congrats if you have done that for the first time, because you know how to create Cosmos DB. So let's try to see the already created one. I think I've created this one. So these are the items we have. So let's say you wanted to create a container, right? So you wanted to create a container. I think before creating a container, you need to create a database. If you remember the hierarchy which I've explained. So click on the Explorer. So here you have your Explorer. So if you want to create a new container, you have here options, right? So either you can click directly container if you already have a database, and you can click on new database to create a new database. So let's say first let's try to create a container. I think when you click on container, you already have an option that to create a database. Okay, so usually this is the form which you need to fill. But when it comes to cloud, you just need to fill the forms. You already have this template, the structure and everything. You just need to give your inputs at the backend. A JSON code will be generated, right? And we also have a template thing in Azure, which is called ARM, Azure Resource Manager Templates. So if you wanted to deploy using JSON code, you can leverage them. But at the end of the day, once you add all these inputs, it will generate a JSON code. So you need to add your database ID, right? If you're creating for the first time, if you already have something, you can use the existing one. I've already created a database called product. Okay. I think before going there, let's try to explore all the different options we have here. This is like database ID, you provide everything. Okay. I'll tell you the share throughput. I'll tell you that. And once you create this thing, once that is done for me, let me just uncheck that. And then you come here and create your container. Like I said, container is a table. So you create a container and then you define a partition key. If you see, partition key is really a mandatory field which you need to fill here. So you can't skip this. And why this is important when it comes to NoSQL, we're going to see that. So within your data, you need to identify the proper and the perfect partition key. And that is the role of you being a data engineer, that you need to identify that based on certain features. We are going to discuss what those features are. But this is really important to keep in mind, that you have a partition key, and within container ID, you need to have this container ID details. And then again, you have a container throughput. So here, if you see, you have like two kinds of throughputs. One is database throughput, and the other one is container throughput. Okay. So what are these throughputs and what are these RUs, request units? We're going to discuss this, no worries. And I also have a slide for them. So in a very high level, you need to fill all these details to get your database, and within database to get the container. Okay. Okay, let me close this. Like I said, I've already created them for you. So I've created a product, and within product, we have this table called clothing. So how to create that? What are the different features? We're going to see them here. I think before going there, let's try to understand the RUs, right? Request units. So what are request units? Let's try to understand them. So measuring performance, right? Which is throughput. So let's say you already have your data, which is stored in your NoSQL system. Okay. So now you have two things when it comes to the performance of your system. One is latency, the other one is throughput. So what is latency? I think it's kind of self-explanatory here as well. So if you see here, how fast is the response for a given request, right? You have sent a request, you have written your SQL query, that you have submitted your query saying that select star blah 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 from so and so table with all those where conditions, and now you're waiting to see the result. So the time it takes to retrieve the results is nothing but the latency. Okay. So that's like, the wait time. You can also call it as like a wait time. I think I've already added that here. Yeah, the wait time. So once you submit your request to see the data using SQL query or whatever the query can be, so the time it takes to retrieve the results is called wait time or latency. But why is this really important here? Because guys, if you again remember in the yesterday's session, I've shown you that, geo replication. So here the data gets replicated in different regions, because Azure data centers are completely distributed and stored in different data centers in different regions, right? So let's say someone sitting in some remote location, right, and he's trying to query this. So now this query has to hit to that data center via internet, public code, private cloud. It can be anything, right? Again, we have to set it up, but based on the routing mechanism, it has to retrieve the data for you, right? So it takes certain time, and it takes some time between there. So it has to first go there, prepare the query plan, and then try to retrieve the data and show it to you in your screen, right? So it takes time. And this is very important. No one wants to sit in front of the system after running that request for hours or minutes, because they want their results quickly as possible. That's one thing. And the second thing is throughput. So how many requests can be served within a specific period of time, right? And this is like a number of requests. You might have like parallelly, you might running like 100 requests, maybe not you, your entire team are like querying the same database, because entire team is working on the same data set. So parallelly, there might be like n number of requests which are hitting to the same system. So based on that, like how many requests it can handle, because there is a concept called throttle, right? Request throttle. So once it reaches the maximum threshold, it starts to give you that error, throttling error. We're going to see that when it gives the throttling error and how to manage that and how to handle that. So mainly when it comes to performance, these two things are very important. Okay. And so what do we have to deal with this, and what do we have? What Cosmos DB is helping or providing us to handle these kind of situations, right? So there is a thing called request unit. So this is like a metric, like a measuring unit. When it comes to SQL, you have DTUs, vcores. When it comes to NoSQL, you have request units, RUs in short form. So an RU is a combination of memory, CPU, IOPS. It's like input output performance. So the combination of memory, CPU, IOPS is nothing but an RU. So by default, right, the least number of RUs you can provide in the portal is 400 RUs. That's the least you can give. I mean, below 400, you cannot give, portal will not accept. So it needs minimum 400. And the maximum, it depends. You can give 10,000, 20,000. Again, there is a limit. If you want more than that, because you have like a huge requirement, you can raise a request in Azure portal to the support team, and they can again come and help you on those beyond threshold RUs, right? So here, what you need to understand is RU is the metric, which is a combination of memory, CPU, IOPS for your underlying system. So based on these request units, which you define while designing or while creating your system, so based on that, you see your performance. Okay. So here you define your performance. So for instance, like you might have requests like read. So for one read, it might consume one RU, right? You might have insert, you might have upsert. Upsert is nothing but like, if there is a new insert, it will insert or else it will update. It's a combination of insert and update. And you might have delete query. You might have a query, just like, a query which is like a combination of different inner loops, like inner joins and within where conditions. So for all these, you need to have a proper minimum number of request units defined in the system, right? Or else if the number of requests which you are hitting to the system, if they are more than the RUs which you have defined, it will give you an error. So just you need to be very careful on this. Okay, so usually, if you remember, again, I have showed this portal yesterday. We're going to see this again. So once you use this data explorer, right, once you hit a SQL query, there are two tabs when it comes to the console, right, when it comes to the result console. So you're going to see result in one tab, and there is one more tab called query stats, query statistics. So here, if you see within this, the important metric is request charge. Yeah, request charge. And for this specific request, it took 2.83 RUs, 2.83 request units. So these many request units, it's consumed for this, and it utilized for this specific request. So if you have your query very large and the underlying data is also very big, and to retrieve the data, it is taking so much of time, and then the request units might consume more number of request units. Okay. Yeah. So again, so provision request units per second. Okay, so this is like the unit. It usually consumes per second, and exceeding reserved throughput limits, that gives you this throttling error. This is what I was talking about, because one is latency, the other one is throughput, right? So if you exceed the number of requests which you are hitting to the system beyond the threshold limit, beyond the capacity, you're going to get this error, throttling error. But I think if you try to think very carefully here, right? So let's say I have added, like, by default, like I said, you have to add like 400. Let's say I'll just quickly give an example. Just try to think about this. Like, we've already covered that concept. I just want you guys to think so that, maybe you're thinking in the right direction. Let's say I have already added like 1,000 RUs. Okay. I've added 1,000 RUs. Kind of, yes, you can say that. Yeah. In simple terms, you can say that it can be like a query cost, but it's not only query cost, right? Here it's latency as well, because here the system is like located in different region. So it's kind of combination, but like I said, RU is a combination of your memory, CPU, IOPS. So just remember this, whenever I'm talking about RU, you have to picture this thing in your mind. When it comes to physical system, right? A physical machine, we define a physical machine performance based on these three aspects. Like, okay, if I'm buying a laptop, I might look into like what is a memory, what is a CPU, what is a processor, right? And how is the disk storage, if it is like SSD or not. So based on that, I'll define that, okay, this is fast, this is slow. So RU is something like that when it comes to NoSQL. So let's say I've already defined like 1,000 RUs. Okay, 1,000 RUs I've defined, and I wanted I don't want to get this throttling issue. Okay, I don't want to get this throttling issue. So just try to think that how can I avoid this? You know what I mean? Let's say I've got like a team and who are like working on that, and simultaneously in parallel they'll trying to add and hit those requests using the queries. And if that request reaches the throttling capacity, I will get this error. But I wanted to avoid this. How can we do this? Do we already have some system in place which we've already discussed? Do we have? Can you think of something? I'll count like 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any ideas? Okay, so if you try to think, right now, serverless, I think you are thinking, but here I'm specifically talking that I've already given 1,000 RUs. I'm not talking that, because I've already defined it's a provisioned throughput. I've already said that I've given 1,000 RUs. Burst IOPS, kind of, but it's very simple, guys, because if I create an alert, right? Because RU is a metric. What if I say that once my RU consumption is 800, give me an alert, so that before it reaching 1,000, before it reaching to throttling issue, I'll get a notification using the monitoring service, and I can come back to the system and check, oh, this is going to exceed 800. Maybe I'll increase the RUs. Simple, right? I mean, now it is simple, but before it was complicated. But anyway, let's move forward. So you can utilize those Azure monitoring services, create alerts, which you have done for Azure storage and data lake, right? You can create them and create, because you can add this if else condition there, and which can also, I also see auto scale option there itself. Yes, we also have auto scale option. We're going to see that as well. Okay, so horizontally scalable, we're going to discuss that, but I think before that, let's go to the system and see. Where is this one? Okay, let me open this guy in a new tab. Okay, so for 30 minutes, let's just focus on this. No more charts. let's like completely focus on this. Okay, so this is our system, right? Before going to the system, and if I wanted to create a new container, so what I can do here is, so like I said, like there are two different throughputs, right? I think we will discuss that, but the place where you provide RUs is here. So you can provide RUs on the database level, and you can provide RUs on container level. Okay, so if you provide RUs on database level, you don't get an option to provide RUs on the container level, because all the containers within this database will consume the RUs from this. This is called like a share. And here you are trying to add RU for the specific container. So this is called dedicated. Okay, so very straightforward, right? I think I should have a slide for that. Dedicated versus shared throughput. If you can see here within this slide. So here, if you see, if I give my resource or my request units on the database level, right? And within this database, if I have like 3 containers, so my RUs will be like, distributed. I cannot guarantee that they'll be distributed equally. No, if you give like 1,000, the first one might take 500, and the second one might take 250, and the third one might take 250. So there is no guarantee that you will have like a proper equal distribution when it comes to RUs defining on the database level. But let's say I'm not really sure, because I don't know the load and the storage and also the partition of container 1, 2, 3 within the database. I don't want to take that risk. Then I think the best practice to give RUs is on container level, right? But you have an option to give on database level as well. But usually, most scenarios and most use cases, people give RUs on the container level. So when you give it to the container level, let's say I give an RU on the container level, so then that entire RUs are for dedicatedly specified for these container. Okay, so when you give on the database, it will be shared. When you give on the container, it will be dedicated. So this is the difference between these two. Okay. Okay, I think to understand this slide, you need to understand what is partition. Going back to this guy, at least we know what is what. And now let's try to understand the data. Okay. So I think if you understand this data, we will try to understand what is partition and why it is very important. Okay, so like I said, while filling this form, you need to fill the database. We know when we need to fill also the container ID, which is like a table. And again, what is this partition key? And why is this partition key important? So here, if you see, this is an item. This is a JSON item, right? For our demo, which we'll be using. So you have like different fields within this. Okay, you have ID, which is unique. You also have a product ID. Again, it is an unique. And you have category, manufacturer, description, price. And again, you have like a subset of this JSON with all the different fields and parameters. Okay, I think we know what is this. This is like very straightforward JSON file with the different fields. So what is partitioning then? And why it is important when it comes to NoSQL? Let's try to understand this. Okay, so before partitioning, just keep in mind that, like I said, you have two different types of scaling. One is vertical scaling, the other one is horizontal scaling, right? And in terms of scaling, right, you don't really have to worry about the storage part because you don't have to provision more and more storage. It's automatically horizontally scales based on the data requirements which you're providing to that. Okay, so I mean, that's the reason we use this for big data, right? I mean, there is no limit for the big data. You can store as much as you need. But just assume, guys, assume one thing. Now, all the companies are migrating from their on-premise to cloud systems because they assume that their data is limited, cloud is fancy, no infrastructure, no upfront costs, everything is easy. And you also have like a number of resources in the market available so that you can utilize them and set up entire thing. You can start it immediately. Just like, down the line after 10 years, 20 years or 30 years, just imagine like, how much data they'll be growing in their organization and all the data they will be storing in the cloud, right? And just imagine the storage costs they have to bear going down the line. Maybe after 20, 30 years, everything comes back to on-premise. We never know that, right? Because now everything says like, and everyone says cloud is like in the next, yeah, now for now, yes. But again, down the line, if you go to these Gartner reviews and all, for every second, how much data we are generating in the world, just try to assume and try to compare that and calculate for next 10 years, 20 years. And then the storage costs, okay, you'll have like a huge number of storage cost. And that will be like 3 or 4 times of your infrastructure cost. You never know that. So what I'm trying to say that things might change here and there, but let's not think about that. But here, horizontally scaling is possible because data is unlimited, right? Big data. So you can store that and we have that provision available for us. And the other one is partition. So what is partitioning and why it is really important in terms of NoSQL? So I think this is not a new concept. We already have this partitioning concept in structured query databases, right? So usually, back in days when I was working for a bank, so we used to create partitions based on month and year. So all the data for that specific month, let's say for January, it used to create a new table and all the data, let's say table name underscore year underscore month. So it used to create a partition table and it used to store all the data there. So whenever you try to query the data, adding a where condition, let's say I want select star from this table where retrieve the data for month January. So it doesn't really have to like scan the entire database or scan the entire table. It will directly hit to that specific partition table and then it will retrieve the data. Right. So here what we are trying to do is we are trying to create a logical partition. We are not really trying to create like a physical partitions when it comes to disk or when it comes to system. These are all logical partitions, right? So we are trying to create those logical tables in the partitions and we are storing that January data in that specific table. When you try to query that, it will be easy and it will be quick and you have like very fast retrieval speed there. That is a main usage when it comes to partitioning. So why do we have that partitioning concept when it comes to JSON document or semi-structured document? Because here, like I said, we don't have a schema, right? So the JSON documents are a schema-less document. So here, when you don't have a schema, so you need to create a partition because the other thing is you have, of course, index management because partitions, index, they kind of go hand in hand, right? You have an index management here. We are talking about big data, right? So in the example which we have seen, we might be like just inserting like 2 rows, but let's assume that you are getting like data for every second and it's getting stored somewhere. And when you try to query that, right, even after all the index thing is done, but still query time might take so much. And when you do a partitioning thing for that specific data, right? And then you will create a logical partitions on the physical data center, on the physical NoSQL database. And when you retrieve or when you try to query that, it will be the retrieval speed will be fast, and you'll get results as soon as it can retrieve from the center. Okay. So for example, here you have a small example. I think, let's say you have a JSON document, and within the JSON document, you have a column called city. Okay. And I think we'll try to compare this with the data which I have. I'll show that. And just assume that you have a JSON file, and within the JSON item, okay, you have one field, right? One attribute, one field, which is city. So here I'm trying to add a partition key as city. Okay. And within the data, you have London as one item within the JSON document as city, and New York City, Paris, and Rome. Let's say you have like 4 different records, okay, within that city. So here what happens is it tries to create unique logical partitions. Okay. For all the data of London, it will create a logical partition. All the data of New York will be in one logical partition. Paris in one, Rome in one. Okay. And grouping of all this will be stored somewhere in the physical partitions. And we don't know where this will be stored. We don't have like any control over this. But we know that we are trying to create a partition on city key, right? City is a key here on the JSON document. We know that it will create a logical partition, right? So whenever you try to query that, select star from where city is equal to London, then it will directly hit to this logical partition and it will retrieve the data. Again, very straightforward, guys. We don't really have to spend time on this. Partition, partition key, logical partitions, and physical partitions. We know what are they. Okay. So here, one important thing is when it comes to physical partitions, right? The data will not be shared in 2 physical partitions. So that is one important thing which you need to remember. Let's say like, the city Paris, of course, it has its own logical partition. And all these logic, the London, New York City, and Paris, let's say all these are grouped and they are in this physical partition. Okay. Somewhere located. We don't know. Maybe somewhere in the East US if you have selected that region. And in any situation or in any scenario, you won't have Paris located here and also Paris located here. That is not a possible scenario and that won't happen. So maybe if this is like exceeding, then all the data from this will be shifted to this guy, and that happens again internally, right? But at the end of the day, you being as an end user, you will have the access to the data explorer and you'll be writing your SQL query and you will try to hit to your container. And this entire thing happens internally. So you don't have to worry about this. Like I said, right? So dedicated and shared throughput. So when you give request units on the database level, they'll be like shared between these 2 containers, right? But when you give dedicated RUs, that will be specific to this container. That is important here. Okay, so you need to avoid hot partitions. So what are hot partitions? I think this is very, very important, right? So let's say, like I said, right, back in days when I was working as an engineer, we used to create partitions based on timestamp, based on month and date, right? So let's say the latest month, this is like July, right? So all the data which is coming from the source systems for this month gets stored in one table, which is partitioned for July. Okay, just imagine this situation or scenario. So what hot data, right? What is hot. In Axis tiers, we discussed what is hot, what is cool, what is archive, right? Hot is nothing but the data which we frequently access, right? So if you try to create a partition on date time, and usually, right, if anyone wants to have like this month's data, and mainly they'll be interested on latest data, right? Let's say you are creating a partition on week, or maybe you're creating a partition on day. So the data which is coming for today, everything will be stored today, and everyone tries to hit to that same data and to that same logical partition. So here what you're trying to do is you're trying to exceed your throughput. So while designing or while defining a partition, you need to keep in your mind that you should avoid hot partitions. So in this case, we should avoid adding a partition on date time. That is not a good practice. Because here, if you see the architecture, if you see the structure, right, we are mainly based on request units because we are defining request units for the NoSQL database, and we are mainly relied on that. So if you try to give like date time and everyone wants to query the latest data, right, and all that data gets stored in one logical partition, and the remaining logical partitions will have data which are older days data, and no one is interested on these logical partitions older days data because everyone wants the latest data. So all the users will try to hit to the same logical system, and then for this you have only 2500 because here we are using like dedicated throughput. You know what is dedicated throughput, right? So dedicated throughput is nothing but when we give RUs on a container level. Okay, so here when I give a dedicated throughput on this container, for instance, and this container will again try to distribute the request units within that logical partitions. Within this container, let's say if you have like 4 logical partitions, and for these 4 logical partitions, it tries to divide it equally, maybe think like that. Okay, just try to imagine the situation. And you have the latest data completely added to one logical partition. So everyone tries to hit to this. So what happens is like, you have like high throughput for this, and this will be like non-usable. So you're not really using them properly then in this scenario. Okay, so it looks something like this. So like, majority of the data goes in one logical partition, and the remaining logical partitions are simply waiting there and sitting idle and freely, just freely taking all the salary without working. But this is the guy who is working and taking all the burden there. We don't want this. So you need to avoid hot partitions. So how you can avoid hot partitions? How? So you need to find a unique identifier or unique key so that, for instance, like city, right? I mean, some data, London data will be stored in this, and New York City data will be stored in this, Paris here, and maybe some other region, Amsterdam, maybe that's stored here. Whenever user queries for Amsterdam data, it will hit here. When user queries New York data, it will hit here, right? In that situation, it will be equally stored and distributed, and also the request units will also be like, will not exceed the throughput. Okay, so this is very important when defining the partitions. So like I said, partition key bad choice on current time, partition key good choices on user IDs, product IDs, cities. So these kind of things you need to keep in mind. So you need to use like, high cardinality here. You need to have more uniqueness. It is fine if you have more logical partitions. Okay, let's say like I'm adding user ID. User ID is a unique thing. Every time some new user adds some data, a user ID will be created that is unique for that user. And for that specific user, there'll be a new logical partition. It is okay. Because guys, we are talking about distributed systems here, right? Let it distribute, no worries. But don't put all the data in one system or in one logical point. That is what we need to avoid while designing this. Going back to my system. Okay, so here you need to define the partition key. So how will you know which partition key I need to define or decide? So for that reason, you need to analyze your data before creating your system. That is very important. That's the reason I've not created this, because this is the input data which I'll be getting from the system. Now I'm trying to analyze. Okay, within this I have different fields. So now I need to decide which key or which ID I can add for the partition key here. So you have ID, you have product ID, you have category. Like I said, you have different fields and columns here, right? So within this, for me, if you ask me, right, if you wanted to have a good partition key on this, I would say you need to go for product ID, because product ID is unique for all the products, right? Again, if you go for category, right, again, categories, like, these categories can be common for few things. Let's say you have more demand for women clothing category. So in that case, more requests will be hitting on the women's clothing category, and you will reach and exceed your threshold throttling range which you've defined. We don't want that. So that's the reason what we'll do is we'll create on product ID. So this is what we are trying to do here. We will create partition on product ID, and we'll create the container, and we'll add the database. I think this is what I've already created. So if you see here, I've created a product, I've created a clothing table, right? And within this, you have different items. And if you see, I've already inserted the data. I'll show you how to insert the data. Okay, here we have this one, Data Explorer. You come to your items, right? So if you wanted to add a new item, right, you can use upload so that you can upload the files from your local system. You can use that option, or else you can use this guy, new item, right? So by default, it will give you a ID, like, this guy. So let's say I wanted to insert my data. Okay, I wanted to insert my data because this guy should be unique. I should be unique. I think rest everything can be handled like this. Okay, so I'm trying to add this one. Just save this. Okay, so you have like new record added here. I think this is the one which we have added with ID2, and this guy. So I think the data which we've added was only this, but there was like some additional information which we get when we try to add data. One is like, unique identifier key. And the other one is, I mean, there are few fields, but for us, the important thing is this timestamp. So when you added this data, so you get this timestamp until like milliseconds, I believe. So you have this kind of information which you're getting along with the data which you try to add. Okay, so if you wanted to query some data, right? You wanted to query this data. So how do you do that? Like I said, let's try to explore these options here. So you have here as well, new container database. You can also create a container and database from this tab as well. Okay. And there is another thing which is called Azure Synapse Link. You can link your NoSQL database to the Azure Synapse. That is possible. You do it from here. I think we'll explore this on Synapse class. And you have notebooks, like I said, right? So you can also write your Python scripts and scale up scripts there, or else like .NET C# programming scripts. And then you have new SQL query. This is what we're going to try now. But before that, you can also open query, right? If you've already saved something, you can open your existing queries. And you also have like, store procedures if you already have something. So let's try to open a new query. So by default, once you click on that, you'll get like select star from C. C is a short form for container. Okay. So if I try to execute this, it should retrieve me all the data I have within this container. So if you see the results, I've got like 3 results. So ID1. Okay, ID1, ID2, and then you should have another ID2, and ID1. Yeah, but here the product key is the unique identifier. Okay, and the other thing which I was showing in the PPT, right, the query stats. If you see the request charge, it consumed 2.31 request units. And while creating this, I have added 400 request units because that's the minimum thing you can add, and I have added 100. You will get the same result. The request units won't change. This is a good thing. Once it defines something, it won't change. Okay, so let's say now you wanted to add like some extra filter conditions for this guy. So I think we already have some queries. I think if you're familiar with SQL query, you don't really have to look here. So then you add a, you can utilize, you can leverage all the SQL functionalities, all the functions, methods, everything within the SQL query, right? I've added like, p.id, which is 1. So it retrieves me the data, which is 1. And you can have like multiple items, and you can also leverage like joins and everything. So let's not try to explore more on this, because this is something which you can explore by yourself, because with the practice and all, what you need to understand is what are the different functions and features we have within this. That's the important takeaway from this part, at least. Okay, so again, there is a concept called like, single partition query and a cross partition query, and also like, composite key, and choosing a partition, and indexing, time to leave. Okay, let's go to this single query partition. So single partition query is nothing but, like I said, right? So if you're giving a partition on the name, right, and the data, just imagine that now we've used product ID as a partition. Okay, so product ID 1 is here, product ID 2, product ID 3, product ID 4. So when you try to query that using a product ID in the where condition, right? So then this is called like a single partition query. Okay, straightforward. But you've used product ID, and now you're trying to query based on product category. just try to assume what I'm trying to say here. Of course, here there is something else, but there in the product data which we've added, clothing, right? So now we've added partition on product ID, but we are trying to query on the product category. So in that case, what happens is, so it will try to run for all the logical, because the where condition is something else, and we don't have a partition on that where condition, so it cannot find in one logical entity. It has to run through the entire logical entities and find the result for us. So this is called cross partition queries and fan out queries. I think you just need to understand this concept. This is not really important for the exam, but just try to understand. Okay. And you have a composite key. I think most of you must be already familiar with what is composite key. Composite key is nothing but like the combination of primary keys, right? It's like one or two or more keys combining, you call them as composite key. So let's say you have a situation and scenario where you wanted to combine two keys and give them as a partition key. You can use them. Let's say you have name, right? And you feel that name is not really being unique there, and I also wanted to, like, you know, add month, day and year to that. So for Amit and date combinedly will be added and created a logical partition, and whenever you try to add any one of this in the filter condition or where condition based on the combination, it will go to this logical entity or logical partition, and it will try to retrieve the data. So here what we are trying to understand, what I'm trying to say here is, you can also leverage composite keys while creating a partition key. Okay. So again, choosing a partition, right? So you should be like evenly distributed. Like I said, you know, don't worry about if I select like a unique key, it will be like, it will create more logical partitions and it might mess up the system. No, we need that. We need that distribution, because we are trying to distribute the data as much as possible so that, you know, we have faster query responses. Okay. And one important thing here, at least from this slide, if I were you, I would take this guy and remember them, because the maximum document size should be 2 MB. It shouldn't cross this. And the maximum logical partition should be 20 GB. So you need to be careful on this, right? So if you select a logical partition where you can have more data, which will exceed 20 GB, again, then the system will, like, you know, it tries to intimate you so that, you know, my logical partition size is getting beyond my limit, right? So be careful while choosing the logical partition, because there is a limit on this. So for logical, it is 20, and for document size, it is 2 MB. Okay. Okay, so automatic indexing, like I said, you know, within the system, right, within NoSQL database, you don't really have to worry about indexing. So it automatically does the indexing for you. So you don't really have to, like, you know, define the indexing, different types of like indexing things, right? You know, I think when it comes to SQL, you have heap and columnar store. Boy, I forgot those things. But you have like different types there, right? But you don't really have to worry about them here when it comes to NoSQL. So system automatically builds those indexing for you. Like I said, right? So you have this tree-like structure, right? This is a JSON document, and you have like, you might have somewhere some root node, and within that you have leaf nodes, like location, headquarters, exports, and within that you have again subnodes. Yeah. And it tries to, you know, put it in the file systems. At the end of the day, guys, this is again Hadoop system. Everything stores in the file system in the data centers, right? So usually it kind of creates this kind of structure when you try to query something like this, where location dot country is equal to France, right? So you wanted to get a location of this specific thing and adding a where condition, then it will try to, you know, query this list, and it will try to hit this record, and it will retrieve and show it on our user console. Okay, time to live. So what is time to live? So when it comes to NoSQL database, right? So you have an amazing feature where you can set the expiry time. Let me show you that in the system. So when I go to this Azure system, right? So here itself, I think by now you're familiar with this UI. So when you come to a scale and settings here on the scale and settings, if you go to settings again, right? So here you can change your scale. So here within throughput, I think someone in the group, they were saying that we also have auto scale. Correct. We have auto scale. Like I said, when I was designing this, there are two things. One is provisioned throughput, the other one is serverless. And within provision throughput, again, you have two types. One is auto scale and the other one is manual. So when it comes to manual, right, I have added 400. Again, when it comes to auto scale, I have to define a number. Within that number, it will try to go up and down. Okay, it will try to auto scale again within that number, but you have to allocate something there. Again, you have to provision some request units there. Okay, so you can also change the scale here as well, and you can see the current cost fields here. And if you go to settings, right, if you go to settings, here you have time to live. By default, it is off. You can turn it on. Okay, and by default, this is measured in seconds. Okay, so let's say I wanted to turn this on and I wanted to delete my data. Let's put 5 seconds. So now I've added like 5 seconds time to live. What this happens is, like, you can set the time, and after 5 seconds, my data within this items, right, it will be deleted automatically. Okay, I have selected that. Refresh. 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. Yeah, you see, there is no data. There is no data. There is no data. I think this guy takes some time to refresh, but usually if you try to query also, execute query, you see 0 records because the data got deleted because I've added like 5 seconds as time to live. Okay, so in a nutshell, high level, so you can set the expiry time for the Cosmos DB, and time to live values is configured in seconds, right? And it automatically deletes, and it consumes again to delete. Again, it's a query, right? So it is a query. So it needs request units. So what it does is it will try to consume the leftover request units. Let's say you already have 400, which we've defined. We've already consumed, let's say, like 300 request units for some other system. And there are like only 100 request units. It will try to utilize those 100 request units, whichever left, to delete, to leverage this delete. Okay. So let's say if the request units are not sufficient for that to delete that data, right? So then what it'll do is it will mark it as soft delete. You cannot still retrieve the data, but once it gains all the request units it needed, then it completely deletes the data. So that is what it is saying. Though the data deletion is delayed, data is not returned. Okay, if not enough request units are available. So in a very high level, so if someone says that what is TTL, what are TTL, I think TTL concept is very common. I mean, it's not specific to NoSQL. You can define TTL for so many systems, but we also have it for NoSQL. Okay, so the other thing is multi-reads and multi-writes. I think I've already shown this to you, but I'll also show you in the system because I've already defined it. It takes some time once you enable this for multi-reads and multi-writes. So usually this is used for business continuity, right? High availability and disaster recovery and performance. Why performance? Because the end user who are closely located to that region where we are like, replicating the data, there you have very good latency, right? So they have like the wait time very less. Once they request some data, they are located close to the data center, so they'll get results very fast. So that's the reason multi-reads are important when it comes to performance and also business continuity. When I say business continuity, you have like high availability and also disaster recovery. And what are multi-writes? So here, while selecting or while creating the account, I have selected a location, right? So usually whenever you try to add the data, you have to add from that location, and data will be replicated to a different regions, but that will be only for read only. But now let's say I also wanted to add the data from different regions. You can enable multi-writes so that you can also write the data from different regions as well. Okay, so you have these two options. Let's see how it looks in the system. If I go here, right? Again, this is the portal. Once you create your Azure Cosmos DB account, you will be landed here, and then you come here and replicate data globally. This is under settings. You click on this and you see right now, this is my actual location, which is West Europe. What I've done is I've selected different regions, like I've selected Central US, I've selected UAE North, Central India, and then I have clicked on save. What you need to do is you select this, save this, that's it. So automatically it takes some time. And what it does is it tries to replicate the data from this system to all these different regions. Okay, so let's say for this system, you have provisioned 400 request units, right, while creating this. And it will also consume 400 request units for this. It will additionally provision. You don't have to do that. Again, 400 for this, 400 for this. So again, here you need to consider the cost, because if you're doing a replication to different regions, there is data transfer cost and again request unit cost, because for this, how much ever you have provisioned, it will be automatically added for the different regions. So for multi-writes, what you need to do is, like I said, here you can only upload the data on this region, which is West Europe. If you also wanted to add the data to different regions or from different regions, let's say the crowd or the user who is located in India, he wants to add the data and he wants to add the data to closest data center. Frankly speaking, for the end user, it doesn't really matter where he is adding, because the URL endpoint is still the same, right? But for whatever reason, let's say this region is completely gone. West Europe is gone. The region is down. Okay, so in that case, you need some other systems automatically up and running, right? So that the users can write the data. That is one other use case for this. So in that case, you need to enable multi-region writes. Okay, so once you enable multi-region writes, again, it'll take some time. Then it will also give you an option so that you can also add the data from different systems. So this is one thing. And there are two different things when it comes to failover. I think that's what we have in the next 2 slides. Manual automatic failover and manual failover and automatic failover. Okay, so once, let's say you have noticed that this entire data center or this entire region is gone, you have noticed it. Okay, and now you wanted to do, like, failover to a different one, right? So what you do is you click on this, and then this is our main region, right? Now you have 3 different regions. So you can select this and you can say that this is gone. So after this is gone, use this one as my primary region. That's it. You just click on this, then manually it will shift from West Europe to UAE. But this you have to do it manually. We don't like manual works, right? We want everything to be automated. So there is another option for us, which is automatic failure. What you need to do is you come here, you select on, and then you queue the priority. If the West Europe is gone, the next priority should be automatically enabled for UAE. You can also change the priorities. Let's say I wanted the next priority should be Central India. You can give the priority. So based on the priority list, the items will be automatically shifted once the system goes down. Okay, so this is about replication. So when it comes to exam, TTL, replication, partitioning, right? Different types of Cosmos DB, which we have discussed, right? 4 different types. And yeah, again, a data explorer, you don't really have to know about data explorer, but you need to practice this because for your real-time work. And the other main important concept when it comes to exam is data consistency, right? So what is data consistency? I'll give you a very high level overview about that, but I think this is important, so I wanted to cover it properly. So let's park it for the next class, this data consistency. And once this is done, I think it should take like more than 10 minutes or something, not more than 10 minutes. And then we can start Azure Data Factory, Vishwamitra will be giving that lecture or session. So let's say someone adding, now you have multi-writes, right? We have enabled multi-writes. We have added multi-writes. And the user located in this region is adding data, because usually, like, users located in this region will be redirected to West Europe. Users located in this region will be redirected to Central India. Let's say both the users are adding data at the same time. So which should take the precedence, right? And some other users located in different region is trying to query the data. So what data he should see first? The data from this guy or the data from this guy, because both have done at the same time, right? So that is where we have a concept called consistency, which data he has to see. And we can also define what kind of consistency you want. There are like 5 different types of consistency when it comes to consistency. If I come here and here, default consistency, you have strong, bounded, staleness, session, consistent prefix, and eventual. You have like 5 different consistency, and it can be easily explained here with these diagrams. I also have like 2 slides on that, and we're going to see how this works and why this is really important with respect to exam and all. So we'll try to discuss in the next class. Like I said, shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. I think once this is done, we are good to go with NoSQL.